Hi, I'm Pam, and this is my monthly update video letting you know everything that I was up to in the month of March. So it is currently April 2nd as I'm recording this, and it is fucking snowing outside. There is actual snow on the ground, and it makes me very angry. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about video games and all the things I was doing this month. Starting out with updates, I actually was a guest or did some guest reviews in a few places. First, I was very excited to be asked by Ian over at Innuendo Studios to do a mini review of the Pandora Directive, which is one of my favorite adventure games, FMV games, just favorite games in general. Him and Willow from Questing Refuge are doing a series of 1-minute reviews of Adventure Gamer's top 20 adventure games of all time, seeing how they stack up. And he asked me to do a guest review on Pandora Directive. This is currently only on Nebula, but it will come to YouTube eventually as a big video. But if you are a Nebula subscriber, I will put the link to that video there. It was super exciting to be asked to do that. I think I've been subscribed to Innuendo Studios for close to 10 years now, so that was pretty awesome. There's also been a new episode of Point and Drink Adventure with Michelle. In this past one, we drank Veuve Clicquot, and we watched The Widow Clicquot, which is the movie about the champagne, and that was fun. There should also be another Point and Drink coming out in the next week or so. I also guested on the Trash Station podcast with my friends Max and Chris, or Potomax and Scotch and Hobbies. Even though it's called, so this podcast is called Trash Station because these two guys tend to play games that are, more than a little bit jank, little free games that most people wouldn't say are good, but they also do play good games. So we basically spent the whole time talking about the games that we've been playing. We had a focus on games with female protagonists because I think we recorded on International Women's Day. So we talked about what we've been playing, we put it on the ranking, said if we would recommend it to people, and it was a fun conversation, so I will also leave a link to the Trash Station podcast if you want to listen to that. I don't have any pickups, which has become the norm. I feel like that's become a special segment now in these videos, so I will get right into the games that I've been playing in March. So the first game I played is Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. This is by Pendulo Studios. It came out in 2021 and I played it on Xbox. I think it's available most other places as well. And this is not a very good game. It kind of takes the Telltale formula in terms of, a little bit of exploring around, looking at things, making conversational choices, the occasional quick time event. And that's a system of game that, has become a little boring for me over the years. I started playing this and I almost immediately bounced off it, and I decided I would give it another try. Was about to put it down again, and then Dylan came in the room and he's like, "What's this? This looks awful, let's play it." So we ended up playing the entire thing together. It was probably around 10 or 12 hours long, which was too long for this game. It takes its name from Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, and plot-wise, there's some parallels there, but it definitely does its own thing. It also just throws in random Hitchcock references throughout as well. It's about a man who, in the beginning, he saw his car go off a cliff, which he says that his wife and child were in, except no wife and child were found. And then he saw his father, who died when he was a child, jump off a bridge. And now he has a horrible case of vertigo, and a psychiatrist or psychologist is trying to help him out with that. So you're basically going through all of these psychology appointments where he's telling events of things, how he think they happened, but then the psychologist, not mind control, hypnotizes him, and you find out what really happened. And it just was pretty janky, honestly. The plot twist, it goes from kind of boring to ridiculous plot twists that don't end up making much sense. Everything takes too long. By the time we thought we were near the end of the game, there was still a couple hours left that were not needed. Once you found out, oh, this is what happened, you couldn't just find that out. You had to play an hour segment showing you exactly how it happened. The QuickTime events were just annoying. Like it was all kinds of just like rotate this stick and do them together in the opposite directions, and just let me press A to open the fucking door. It wasn't good. The animation was weird. Everyone was always sitting around with their mouths open going. There was like weird delays and everything. So many loading screens. Sometimes there'd be a segment, you'd see like a little 30-second cutscene and then another loading screen. So it wasn't optimized very well that way. And overall, I just don't think it was a very good game. So I would not recommend Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. I also did end up finishing something that I had put on my retired list last month. It is Cabernet. This is developed by Party for Introverts. It just came out a month or two ago. I played it on Xbox. And this is a vampire narrative role-playing game. It takes place, I think, the 1800s or the 18th century in Eastern Europe. You are a young woman doctor who just died and was changed into a vampire, and you have to sort of navigate vampire society as well as human society, making decisions, deciding who you're going to feed on, who you're going to have relationships with, how you're going to obey or disobey orders given to you by the Countess, who sort of rules over the land. And overall, I did like it. I put it down the first time because it was very buggy, like pretty big, significant bugs. It did get a few patches, so I picked it back up again. And though the big ones, like getting locked into rooms or, game-breaking bugs, were fixed, and I didn't have any of those, there were still just little things. Like while playing on Xbox, walking around or flying around as a bat, just like constant screen tearing and screen flicker, which was pretty annoying. Sometimes a character would be talking, but they wouldn't be on screen, so they'd just be a disembodied voice. Just some of the little things around, you have to go near something for the icon to pop up for you to interact. That was a little bit fussy sometimes. Also, one of my biggest pet peeves in games right now is that you can use a controller, but when it comes to the menus, you can't use like the D-pad or the stick. You actually have to like put a mouse cursor around the screen rather than being able to just go from button to button, which is bad experience. But I liked the game overall. The story was fun. Most of the voice acting was good. I like that kind of narrative role-playing game where you don't have to really worry about combat or anything. You just have to make decisions. You level up. In this, your stats that go up are more knowledge stats, so you can level up your science or your history knowledge or your music and literature knowledge, and then that will determine what conversation paths you can go on with people and how people will respond to you. I overall liked how my game ended up. I liked that there was romance in the game and that you can romance multiple people at one time if you like to. So overall, the story was good. There was just a lot of little extras like controlling and bugginess that were definitely annoying and took something away from the experience, but the game overall was pretty good. Next one I finished is called The Roottrees Are Dead. I played this on PC. I believe it is only on PC right now. It is by Robin Ward, and it came out this year, not too long ago. And this is the kind of like puzzly detective game, very similar to something like The Return of the Obra Dinn. You play a person who's basically working as a genealogist. This rich family called the Roottrees had just died in a plane crash, and someone comes to you and wants you to put together their entire family tree so that they know who needs to be paid out from their estate, because everyone blood related to them gets some kind of money after the main family has died. So you're basically going through a very late 90s, early 2000s looking interface on a computer. You're searching for people, getting articles, you're finding newspaper articles or books from the library, even like teen idol magazines you'll find things from, and you're filling out this big family tree where you have to get everyone's picture, their name, their occupation, and sort of like who their spouses were and who their children were. And I really liked this. It's one of those really good sort of deductive reasoning type games. I had a lot of fun with it. It's not super long, like maybe 4 or 5 hours it took me for the first part of the game. I really liked it. If you liked sort of puzzly deduction games, definitely recommend it. And it's actually got a whole other half of the game as well. So once you finish that first family tree, basically not really a new game plus, because it's like an entirely different thing comes up where now you have to discover a whole second kind of family tree. And I didn't end up playing through this one because it got sort of overly complicated very fast. So I played through the first half, really liked it, put it down for a couple weeks, and then went to play the second one, and there was just a lot of like, oh, well, remember all the information from before and look at that information again. And I just didn't really want to re-catch myself up on all of the information because it was a lot. So if you want it, there is even more complicated deductions and puzzlings to do in the Roottrees Are Dead, so I do recommend that one for any puzzle fans out there. Next game I played and finished is Split Fiction, which was one of my most anticipated games from this year. It is by Hazelight Studios. It just came out in March, I believe. I played it on Xbox. It's also available on PS5 and PC if you want to, and this is a co-op only game. You play 2 writers. One is a fantasy writer, one is a sci-fi writer. They think they're going to this publishing place to have their stories published, but actually it turns out the CEO is an evil genius and he's got this big evil AI machine that's gonna steal everyone's ideas, and something happens and the 2 girls end up in the same idea stealing pod together, and they basically have to go through each other's stories until they figure out a way to get out and protect their ideas. I've really enjoyed all of the Hazelight games. I loved playing It Takes Two co-op. I really like A Way Out, and this one feels like It Takes Two, just like improved in pretty much every way. The gameplay is very solid. It's just like very fun, very fast, no matter what area you're in, whether you're in like a Tron like sci-fi world or if you're in a world with like dragons and fairies and trolls, you can always like double jump and dash everywhere. So the movement's just like very quick. There's so much momentum, especially at the beginning of the game. It just feels very like go, 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 go. It's a nice one to play co-op because everything is very intuitive. Like there's not too much stopping and figuring like, oh, where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do? It's pretty obvious what you're doing most of the time. Each player also has their own abilities, so in each story you get a separate set of mechanics. So having all of these different abilities and the abilities changing from story to story really keeps the gameplay interesting and kept me really excited to find out what was going to happen next. It goes from some fairly serious things to very goofy things, like one where you're running around as pigs, and one of the pigs just farts and is able to fly around with rainbow farts. It's very silly. The story, I've heard a lot of people complain about the story, and I agree that it's like kind of silly, especially the whole like the sci-fi and the fantasy person are so opposed. Like most people like sci-fi and fantasy. It's not that big a deal. But I never found that the story took anything away from the game, and even though there were cutscenes, I still felt like the game was just constantly having forward momentum, and I was constantly having something to do myself, so I never felt like I was just sitting and watching people talk about things that I didn't want to hear about. And by the end especially, I did really like the characters. It was very predictable. I predicted basically every turn, but again, that's fine. It was more just about the gameplay and how it changes. Like most of the time you're in sort of like a 3D platformer, but then there's times where it goes to a 2D platformer or a scrolling shooter or something that looks like you're inside of a pinball game. Like there's just lots of variation in the gameplay. It's also quite forgiving, so if one of you dies, you basically just wait a second and you come back very close to where the other one is. The only time you really have to reload is if both of you die at the same time, and even then the checkpointing is very forgiving, so it was never frustrating to play, even, you know, if I end up dying a bunch of times in a row. It was always very fun. So yeah, if you like co-op games, I absolutely recommend Split Fiction. I think it's the best co-op game, one of the best co-op games I've ever played, for sure. I also played and finished Twilight Monk. This is a Metroidvania-ish game. It is for PC and Switch right now. I played it on PC. It is by Aquatic Moon Games, and it just came out this past month. If you want to know all of my thoughts on this, I did make a review, so you can click on that somewhere if you want to see everything I have to say about it. Overall, I really liked it. It felt like a very cozy game. It had like such a nice art style. Like the art was beautiful. I loved the UI and the menus. They all looked so visually pleasing. Like the fonts were just like, I loved them. But it's a really fun game where you go from an overworld map and towns, kind of like in a JRPG or like Zelda 2 or something, but then in the dungeons you're doing 2D platforming. There's all sorts of abilities you get, areas that are blocked off to you until you get abilities later. Even though it is dungeon-based, there's lots of reason to return to old dungeons to get collectibles as well as for story reasons. Something that I've seen a lot of people complain about is the save system in the game. Just looking on Reddit since I played this. This does use a basic like retro save system. You go to a save point, you save. If you die, you go back to that save. You don't like save any, you don't keep any of your map progress or experience or anything that you've gotten. And some people don't like that. I personally would take that over the Souls-like return to your body and collect your shit like any day. And I never found that I was feeling too punished. Like the save points are close enough together. Even if you feel like you're gonna die, there are potions which will bring you back from the dead once, which are very, very helpful. Sometimes even if you're not near a save point to go and refill your health, you can at least find a fast travel point and then just go back to town and refill your health. So I didn't feel like I was losing progress or losing time for that save system, and I actually really ended up liking it. And this next one was very timely considering the review I did for Innuendo Studios. I did also just finish replaying the Pandora Directive over on Twitch. This is on PC, it's by Access Software, and it came out in 1996. I've played this game a number of times, but this was my first time streaming it. Just wanted to play something kind of familiar and comforting, and it was that for the most part. It's just like such a good FMV game. The acting is better than you would see in most FMV games, although there's also like a bit of corniness to, you know, because you would expect that. You would miss it if it wasn't in an FMV game. But it has some of the greatest puzzles, just like such a variation of puzzles, and some of them are real head scratchers. I also just love that you can freely travel around this 3D environment while at the same time doing your basic like picking up things and looking at them and combining inventory. It's a fantastic fast travel system, fantastic hint system. It has a story which is really interesting, just steeped in conspiracies and kind of femme fatales and just all of your noir tropes that you would be interested in having. Yeah, if anyone hasn't played the Pandora Directive, I always recommend that one. There are a few things that are annoying, like one particular fireball maze that the controls are just not cut out for, but otherwise it's a fantastic game and I really liked replaying it. Oh, I also have an entire full, like 15-minute review of that on my channel somewhere. And the last game I finished, which just got finished last night, is called Pampas Selene, The Maze of Demons. This is on PC. It's by Unepic Fran, and it came out in 2024. This is a game that I played co-op. It seemed like a game that was meant for co-op, but as I played it, I realized co-op was kind of an afterthought. It is a very retro-styled game, dungeon crawler-like. If I had to compare it to something, it would be like Astalon in terms of new Metroidvanias, or Castle in the Darkness. I forget the NES game that looks like Astalon, but it looks kind of like an NES game. You're going through this 2D castle. There's lots of things to explore. There's lots of new abilities to get. You've got two characters, Pampas the warrior and Selene the mage. And if you were to play in single player, you can switch between the two characters as you go. In co-op, obviously one plays each. And it did some things that I really liked in co-op, mainly that you can go off on your own way. So if I want to go this way and Dylan wants to go this way, we just go off and do our own things. And then at any time, either of us can teleport back to the other one, which was a really, really good mechanic. You go through the dungeon, there's lots to find. There's demons, I think there's 8 demons that you, or maybe 10, that you have to beat all the time. You're doing quests for these gods and they're giving you new abilities and new equipment to make you stronger. And the first half of the game, I was really enjoying. Like, it was a solid B-tier Metroidvania for me. But as it went, I began to notice that this really was not a game that was designed for co-op, despite that first cool mechanic I talked about. There were some dungeons and some boss fights where one character just could not participate. Like, they couldn't do anything. They were just entirely a liability. I think there was one demon fight where one of us just stayed out of the fight room for 75% of the fight because there was nothing that they could do to be of any help. There is also dungeons where, like, for movement, one person gets a double jump and one person gets a blink. And if you didn't have the double jump, you couldn't go anywhere. So Dylan was playing the double jump character, and I could either continuously teleport to him every time he made a jump, or just go off and do my own thing because I wasn't being of any use. Likewise, the final boss had abilities that one person could not avoid. You needed the blink to avoid it, so I could avoid it, but the warrior would just get hit every time. It just ended up being very annoying, very like weird, mean design decisions. Like, the achievements are completely turned off in co-op just cause. The final boss we could not beat in co-op. One of us had to leave the game so that we could do the quick character swap in order to do the attack that we needed to kill the demon. So the experience of this game just started off like, oh, this is good, and it was just like, wow, where we were both just like hate finishing the game by the end of it. So can't say I recommend Pampas and Selene. It's nice that you can play it co-op, but it would be much nicer if it actually felt like it was designed for co-op. There's also a few games that I retired this month. My co-op Wednesday group, we were playing Orcs Must Die Deathtrap. We're playing this on Xbox. It's by Robot Entertainment and it just came out this year. And this is one we were initially very excited about. Orcs Must Die is basically like kind of like a tower defense. You're in a big open area and you have access to traps and you see areas where monsters will start coming in. So you're trying to basically build death trap hallways so that they will die before they reach this portal or orb or something in the middle of the room. And I think it looks really good. There's multiple characters you can play, each with their own abilities. So in addition to setting up the traps, you're also just going through and meleeing them or throwing knives or casting spells. And I liked all of that. I liked how it played. The problem was with the progression system. Like, it wasn't just a campaign, which would have been ideal, but instead you had to go through a certain number of rounds. So each level was, I think, 6 rounds. And at the beginning, you have to go through 2 levels and then a 3rd level with a boss. And that's like a completed run. Congratulations, you're done. And then the next one, you have to go through 3 levels, so that's 18 rounds, and then a boss. And it just got to the point where it was incredibly long and you can't save between them. So it was getting to the point where just trying to get through like the second grouping so we could get to the second boss was taking our entire night, and that was really annoying. So we ended up giving up on this one, even though like I'd like the game that's there. I just wish it was a campaign or just a little bit more condensed of an experience, because I really liked the traps. Like, I started getting into these biological traps that would like spread all through the level whenever they did damage. I felt like the levels were too large, like especially some of the boss areas, they were just so completely open and it was almost impossible to find a way to like funnel the monsters through an area of traps. So yeah, just like good idea, weird execution, and I wish that they would change it just a little bit so that we could play more. Another game I gave up on fairly quickly is called Voidwrought. This is a Metroidvania from last year. It is on PC, and is it only on PC? I think it's only on PC, maybe other places. It's by Power Snake. This is sort of like a gloomy-ish looking Metroidvania, 2D art. I bounced off this one fairly quickly because it does one of my least favorite things, and that is has a character that has too much momentum and feels slippery. I didn't get very far. I don't even know if I got any new abilities. I just sort of found my way to a first boss and felt like every time I was jumping on small platforms, I was just sliding right off them, and I turned it off and I refunded it. So don't think I gave this one much of a chance, but there's so many Metroidvanias out there. Next one I played is something that's been in my Steam library for a bit. It's called Stirring Abyss. This is by Sleepy Sentry and it came out in 2020. This is a tactical turn-based game, sort of like an XCOM-like. You are sort of old-timey military, Navy, Marines, whatever, and you are in a submarine. Something happens, you find yourself sort of on the ocean floor looking around. It's very Lovecraftian. You're finding all these weird creatures down there and getting into fights with them. So there's one aspect which is upgrading your submarine, leveling up your characters, and then there's an exploration, going on the ocean floor, finding supplies or doing a quest, and then getting into turn-based combat with the various creatures you find. And I liked this quite a bit at first, but it soon showed off its limitations and problems. One of the biggest problems is that it kind of forces you into Iron Man mode. The game autosaves and there's only one save file, so it is definitely possible to get to a point where you've kind of fucked yourself and half of your characters are dead and it's really hard to make any progress and you have to just start the whole game again, which I think is not a great look for that kind of game unless you kind of opt into that kind of mode. And the other thing was that it was just really difficult. Like I felt like none of my characters were well enough equipped or had the abilities to really deal with a lot of the enemies that they were coming into contact with. So I ended up playing this one for a few hours, maybe like 2 or 3, got to a certain point and decided it was just a little too frustrating and too difficult for me, so I put it down. And the last one, I've decided to give this one up probably for good, is Sunless Skies. This is from Fail Better Games from 2017. I have been playing it on Xbox. And this is such a strange game because it's half narrative RPG, which is the part I like. I love the writing in this game, all of the characters you find, all of the weird little stories you see as you go sort of from port to port, exploring and trying to make your fortune in this strange kind of Victorian space age of the world. And all of that's great, but then it's also a weird, slow, explory shooter where you're basically like on a train engine and you're going from port to port very slowly. There's enemies around which can kill you, and it's just like so much travel time. I was thinking I want to beat this game because I've played it on and off for years and I really wanted to finally beat it, but I wasn't anywhere close. And looking online on how long to beat or seeing people playing this for like well over 100 hours before they finally defeat it. It's just such a weird decision that they made for a narrative game to make everything outside of the narrative take so long. So I think I'm done with this because I can't travel anymore between systems or between ports, and it just got very old. So I don't know. Maybe I'll look up a wiki to find out exactly what was happening in this game. But yeah, I think that I'm done with Sunless Skies for good. All right, that is it for this update video. Felt like I had a lot of games to talk about. Leave me a comment, let me know what games you've been playing, if you've got any interesting pickups. I think there was a Switch thing today. Are you gonna get a Switch too? I'm not gonna get a Switch too. I can answer that question before 700 people ask me that. Apparently, Silksong was in that Nintendo Direct though for like a second and a half of a freeze frame. So hopefully that'll come out this year. But anyways, that's all for me for now. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. If you want to see more, check out one of my other videos. I also have a Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.